And we are joined right now by Dr. Linda Elder, educational psychologist, president and fellow of the Foundation for Critical Thinking. Her latest book, I believe, is 30 Days to Better Thinking and Better Living Through Critical Thinking. Anyway, we welcome in Dr. Elder. Hey, Doc, how are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Okay, so you have a problem with Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo, as it's come to be known. What is your problem with Gitmo?
Well, the problem is very basic. It's not really a problem with Guantanamo Bay so much as a problem with not allowing people due process of law. So when we begin with the assumption in this country that people have certain fundamental rights.
Yeah, citizens do, yes.
Well, we also begin with the assumption that people across the world have fundamental human rights.
In our country or in general?
Well, it's an assumption that reasonable persons make.
Well, but in our country or in general, because I could name you lots of countries where people do not have these rights. So I don't know that when you say we make an assumption, you want to make an assumption that they should have them?
Well, we have the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights.
Okay, tell it to countries where people don't have rights. But go ahead. I mean, I'd tell it to the North Koreans, tell it to the Cubans, tell it to Venezuelans.
I'm not sure to actually discuss this with you.
You're not here to discuss this with me? What are you here to discuss?
Well, I'd like to discuss it, but I think it's important first to understand that if we start with certain ethical principles, I think we can get a little further with this.
Well, your premise that people have human rights or have rights or guaranteed to right is maybe based on a United Nations document, but it's not something that's practiced universally.
Let me just try something on you. Let's try the acid test of ethical reasoning, and that is this: if the situation were happening to you, would it be okay? And so I can ask this: if you were taken from your country and you were taken to this place and you were held for years and years and years and you were not given a chance to even bring your case before a court, would that be okay with you?
Well, too bad for the terrorists who were picked up on the battlefield fighting us.
Okay. So once we use the term terrorist, then we are able to do all kinds of things with our thinking that we wouldn't be able to do without that concept. So once we label someone terrorist...
Well, they are terrorists. That's why they're in Gitmo.
By implication, we say that they're inhuman, they don't have the same rights that other people have, that they are somehow savages, that they somehow are...
They forfeited those rights, Doctor, didn't they?
We want to.
Doctor, don't people who rob a bank or rob a gas station or murder or rape or whatever and serve jail time, don't they give up their rights? Do they have the same rights as everybody else once they do that?
What you are arguing is that these people, all of these people that we are killing through drone strikes, that we're not even saying who these people are, these people that we're holding in Guantanamo Bay, you're saying that these people just are automatically guilty. We can just assume that they're guilty because the government says they're guilty. They don't need to have any kind of due process. They're not allowed that because they were guilty the minute we labeled them terrorists. And I'm saying that if that were happening to you, that would not be acceptable.
Well, I don't know how critical or valid or strong that line of thinking or line of reasoning is, that if it were happening to you, I got to tell you, if I robbed a bank, I would want to go to jail. So should I? Could you ask me? Should bank robbers go to jail? Yeah, but if it were happening to me, I would want to be in jail. So does that mean, by extension, bank robbers shouldn't? I should say bank robbers shouldn't go to jail because I wouldn't want to go.
I don't think you really answer. You're not addressing the question.
Well, I'm using your line of thinking, but here's something else that
if you were being tortured, if you were being waterboarded, if you were being held.
That's not happening, though. But that's not happening.
To give your story in a court of law, I don't think that would be acceptable to you, and I think that's just rhetoric when you say it's acceptable.
No, I didn't say it's acceptable. I said that by your line of reasoning, if I robbed a bank, it wouldn't be acceptable to me that would be in jail.
It's not a question of whether you robbed the bank. It's a question of when you were picked up for robbing the bank, perhaps you didn't actually rob the bank. but the police decided that you did. So I'm saying that Steve is going to want, in these conditions, Steve is going to want, and he's going to demand due process so that he can bring his story.
Right, which I'm entitled to as an American citizen. They're not entitled to it.
Oh, so only American citizens have a right to any kind of due process.
In America, if you're on a battlefield fighting us, that's a military issue. You don't have the rights that you and I have, unless the government decides you do, which many legal scholars have thought is a big mistake. But here's something I find interesting. You say that our treatment of prisoners at Gitmo is similar to treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany?
The core problem is the same.
Really?
The problem is...
I didn't know they had soccer fields for the Jewish prisoners in the camps.
The problem is that you and I and everyone else living on the planet is not only egocentric, but also sociocentric, which means that we run in packs, and we hang out with people who are like us. So people on the right hang out with people on the right, and people on the left do the same.
Not necessarily true. You can't make that blanket statement.
Well, I mean, when you look at patterns, you begin to see that we tend to want to be around people who think like us. We don't want our thinking challenged in any significant way, in the way that you don't want your thinking challenged right now.
What? No, that's not true. If I didn't want my thinking challenged, doctor, I wouldn't have had you on. You didn't force yourself upon me. We reached out to you. So I do want my thinking challenged, but I need better arguments than this. You're telling me that we treat the prisoners at Gitmo with 3 meals a day, soccer fields, exercise, with facilities that are better than any prison in the country, like the Jews were treated in Nazi Germany, and I'm supposed to take it seriously?
No, you're not listening to what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm listening.
What I'm saying is that the germ of the problem is the same. The core is the same, and that is that we humans tend to privilege those in the in group and to treat those in the out group with less privilege, and that less privilege can come in many different forms. Sometimes it comes in the form of things like torture and things like denying people fundamental human rights. So when that happens, it's similar to what happened in Nazi Germany, and it's similar to what happens when we experiment on animals and cause great suffering and then kill them afterwards, and often we do this for things like cosmetics and so forth. So I mean, there are
we do it for medical research.
Well, there is a lot of suffering that is caused in...
Yeah, well, I don't have a problem with suffering, animal suffering, if it's going to save human lives. And you're throwing so much into the...
You are proving my point.
You're showing so much into one...
You are saying...
Imagine that. I want to save babies, so an animal might have to die to save a baby, a human baby. Gee,
right,
that makes me a bad person.
Because you are also species-centric.
Right. How dare I favor human... And you have a problem... And you have a problem with favoring humans over animals?
Yes.
God forbid you had a baby who could be cured if they experimented on cats or rats or mice, and a cure might be found to save your baby from a disease. You would have a problem with the experimentation?
Have you ever heard...
You're not answering my question, have you? I don't answer a question with a question. I'm asking you.
Animal suffering?
I am asking you a question. Do you have an answer?
I do.
Well, what's the answer?
But I'm trying to get...
No. But you're not going to answer by asking me a question. I asked you a direct question. If your baby could be saved by experimentation...
I heard the question, and I will answer.
Well, please do.
Okay? I think it's debatable. That is, that we humans don't have a right to place our species over other species.
Okay. Well, all right, this conversation, Doctor, I feel sorry for you and your thought process, and God forbid any child you might have. And I'm done with this conversation because there's no reason to continue it.
Have a nice day.
Dr. Linda Elder, ladies and gentlemen.